This video is the next video in the algebra set of videos, and in this video we're going to be looking at factorising the difference of two squares. In these questions we must ask ourselves what by itself would give us the first term. When we find that answer we put it in the start of each bracket. Then ask what by itself would give us the second term, ignoring the minus, and when we find the answer put that at the end of each bracket. Then put a plus in one bracket and a minus in the other. Best way of describing this is by going through a few examples. In part A, it says factorise the following, and we have 25x squared minus y squared. One of the hardest parts of these questions is noticing that it is a difference of two squares. How you notice it's a difference of two squares is usually the variables, either an x or a y or multiple ones like x squared, y squared, will all be squared or to the power of 4. Also, if there's any numbers involved, there'll be square numbers. So for example, 1 as 1 times 1 is 1. You'll have 4 as 2 times 2 is 4, 3 times 3, which would give us 9. So if 9 is there, we know it's a difference of two squares. The same for 16, 25, 36, 7 by 7, which would give us 49. So the same for 49 and so on. So any square number that's there, it's going to be a difference of two squares. Once you've decided that it is a difference of two squares, the best and easiest thing to do is put almost an imaginary square root on both terms. Next, you can open two brackets. If you square root 25x squared, what you'll be left with is 5x. And we write a 5x in the first bracket and a 5x in the second bracket. If you square root y squared, you're left with y. So we write a y in the first bracket and a y in the second bracket, as seen here. And finally then, we have a plus in one bracket and a negative in another bracket. We can check our answer then by multiplying the first term in the first bracket by the first term in the second bracket, and the first term in the first bracket by the second term in the second bracket. We can then multiply the second term in the first bracket by the first term in the second bracket, and the second term in the first bracket by the second term in the second bracket. Doing that, we'll have 5x times 5x, which is 25x squared. We'll have 5x times minus y, which will give us minus 5xy. We'll have y times 5x, which will give us plus 5yx. And then lastly, y times y will give us minus y squared, as we have the minus y in the second bracket. Here, you hopefully can spot that we've minus 5xy and plus 5xy, and they'll cancel to give us 0, meaning we'll be left with 25x squared minus y squared, meaning that what we did with the two brackets at the start was correct. Part B has x to the power 4 minus 1, and again we're factorising this expression. To factorise this expression, we have to decide whether it is difference of two squares, and if you see here, we have x to the power 4 and 1. 1 is a square number, and x to the power 4 can be square rooted as well. I put my imaginary square roots, and I open up my two brackets. The square root of x to the power of 4 leaves me with x squared. So I write that in the start of both brackets. The square root of 1 is just 1. So I write that in the last part of each bracket. I put a plus sign in one bracket and a negative sign in another bracket. Therefore, when we factorise x to the power of 4 minus 1, we're left with x squared plus 1 times x squared minus 1. When we factorise a squared minus 4b squared, what we do again is we notice that this is a difference of two squares by noticing that the numbers involved, which are 4, is a square number, as the square root of 4 is 2. We also notice that we have a to the power of 2 and b to the power of 2, which is squared as well. Putting my imaginary square root on both terms, if I square root a squared, I'll be left with a. So the two brackets that I've opened up, I place an a in the left hand side of each. And then if we get the square root of 4b squared, I'll be left with 2b. And I put that on the right hand side of each bracket. Then I put a plus in one side and a negative in the other. Therefore, factorising a squared minus 4b squared leaves me with a plus 2b times a minus 2b. Part D then, the final part, we're factorising x squared y squared minus 1. Again, we notice that this is a difference of two squares, as it has x squared y squared, so both squares, and then 1, which is a square number, as 1 times 1 gives us 1. With my imaginary square root here, I can work out my answer. To begin, I open up my two brackets. The square root of x squared y squared is xy, so I write that on the left-hand side of the first bracket and the second bracket. The square root of 1 is 1, so I write that on the right-hand side of the first and second bracket, and then I put a plus in one and a negative in the other. The answer for part D of example 1.3 then is xy plus 1 times xy minus 1. That brings this video to a close, and you now should be able to factorise any expression that has the difference of two squares.